A few years ago, my friend Tim and I were looking for a new adventure. We had already explored many popular hiking and camping spots, but we wanted something different this time. We wanted to go somewhere far away from the usual places. After doing some research and talking to locals, we decided on a remote area deep in a forest that was known for being isolated and a bit mysterious. We set out early on a crisp autumn morning. The sky was clear and blue, and we were excited about our trip. We packed our camping gear into the car and drove for hours. The road wound through beautiful scenery, but soon the landscape changed to thick, dark woods. By late afternoon, we arrived at a small parking area surrounded by towering trees. The trailhead was hard to find, covered in weeds and vines. It felt like the forest was trying to hide its secrets. As we ventured deeper, the trees grew even taller, and their branches twisted in strange shapes. The path became rough and uneven, and the forest seemed to close in around us. We hiked for hours, our excitement keeping us going despite the challenging trail. The forest was eerily quiet, with only the sound of leaves crunching underfoot breaking the silence. As the sun began to set and shadows grew longer, we found a small clearing. It was a quiet and peaceful spot, lit by the last rays of sunlight. Ancient trees surrounded us, and the ground was covered in a thick layer of fallen leaves. A cool breeze blew through the trees, making it feel like a perfect place to set up camp. We quickly set up our tent and gathered firewood. Soon we had a warm fire going, and we cooked our dinner. The crackling of the fire was comforting against the growing chill of the evening. We enjoyed the peacefulness of the forest and chatted about our day. As night fell, the atmosphere began to change. The usual nighttime sounds, crickets, owls, and rustling animals, faded away, replaced by a deep, heavy silence. The temperature dropped quickly, and a thick mist began to roll in from the trees. It spread across the clearing like a living fog, curling around us and making everything look strange and blurry. We tried to shake off the growing unease. We laughed and joked, trying to distract ourselves from the eerie mist in the darkness. But then, out of the fog, a figure appeared. He was an older man, probably in his 50s, with a rugged face and intense eyes. He introduced himself as park ranger who patrolled this remote area. Mr. Glenn's sudden appearance was startling. He warned us that this part of the forest was known for strange and frightening events and advised us to be careful. His serious tone made us uneasy, but we thought he was just trying to scare us. We had camped in many strange places before and had always managed just fine. Before leaving, Mr. Glenn gave us one last intense look and disappeared back into the mist. We watched him go, feeling a mix of curiosity and worry. The fire continued to crackle, but the sense of unease grew stronger. The mist thickened, wrapping around the clearing and making everything look like a ghostly blur. The air grew colder, and the silence became almost unbearable. We huddled close to the fire, trying to stay warm. The mist seemed to make everything colder and more isolating. Then we heard a strange noise, a low, melodic humming. At first it was soft and almost soothing, but it quickly grew louder and more unsettling. The sound seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the mist. We looked at each other, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The humming was soon joined by whispers, faint and barely audible at first, but growing clearer and more frightening. The voices spoke in a language we didn't understand. They seemed to come from the mist itself, surrounding us and making us feel deeply afraid. The whispers were accompanied by a rhythmic, distant beating, like a drum. I glanced at Tim. His face was pale and he looked scared. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Before I could answer, the mist grew thicker and started to form shadowy figures. These figures were tall and thin, with glowing eyes that cut through the darkness. They seemed to glide through the mist, getting closer and more menacing. Fear took over. We grabbed our backpacks and tried to understand what was happening, but the shadows seemed to close in on us. The whispers grew louder, filling our heads with terror. The mist felt alive, wrapping around us and making us feel trapped. Suddenly, Mr. Glenn's voice cut through the chaos. "Get out of here now!" he shouted from the edge of the clearing. Without thinking, we grabbed our things and ran. The figures and whispers followed us, but the mist seemed to part, creating a narrow path through the forest. We stumbled through the darkness, branches scratching our faces and roots threatening to trip us. The forest felt alive with a dark energy, and the mist seemed to try to pull us back. The shadowy figures stayed just out of sight, their presence felt but never fully seen. We pushed ourselves harder, driven by fear and adrenaline. The mist seemed to close in behind us, making every step feel like we were racing against an unseen force. Finally, after what felt like hours, we burst out of the forest and into a small clearing where our car was parked. We jumped into the vehicle, slammed the door shut, and drove away as fast as we could. The mist began to lift, and the whispers faded, but the fear remained. We drove in silence, the night's events replaying in our minds. When we finally stopped at a diner hours later, we tried to make sense of what had happened. We talked about the shadowy figures, the humming, and the whispers, but nothing seemed to fit. The experience felt like a strange, frightening dream. The next day, still shaken and desperate for answers, we decided to find Mr. Glenn and thank him for his help. We called the local ranger station, but when we described him, the woman on the other end went silent. "There hasn't been a ranger named Glenn here for over 20 years, she said quietly. "He disappeared in those woods and was never found." The news hit us hard. We stared at each other in shock, realizing the terrifying truth. Whoever or whatever saved us that night was not a man, but something much older and connected to the forest's dark history. We never went back to those woods. The memory of that night still haunts us, a chilling reminder of the unknown and the unexplainable. The mist, the whispers, and the shadowy figures remain a part of our shared experience, a terrifying reminder of the supernatural and the eerie mysteries that lie beyond the edge of the known world.